Go ahead and get started here in just a second, y'all. Sarah, you guys are all good online?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Public Facilities Committee. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I will call this meeting to order if you'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Are we already all clear with FOIA, Sarah?
Yes, sir, we are.
Perfect. I'll move on to number 4, the approval of the agenda. Can I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And a second, please.
Second that.
Second by Ms. Brown. Any objection to the approval? Which I see no objections, so this will be passed. So we'll move on to number 5, approval of minutes from January 27th, 2025 and February 18th, 2025. Can I have a motion for both
I'll
those?
make that motion.
And a second? Not all at once.
Second.
And second by Mr. Glover. Thank you. Any objection or comments? I see none, so this will also be approved. We'll move on to number 6. Sarah, do we have any public comments?
No, sir, we don't.
Is there anybody that did not sign up that would wish to speak? All right, we will close public comment. Everyone's out for St. Patrick's Day today. We'll jump right into number 7, the Assistant County Administrator Report. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. So as requested when we did our capital projects update at the last meeting, Councilmember Tavernick, Vice Chair Tavernick, asked that we only update what had been changed. Mr. Getsy at the last minute is unable to get here. And what we're going to do is email all of council plus provide to the clerk for backup a list of all, I think it's 93 or 94 projects as of today with their status. And then we will give in written narrative the update for what has changed from last month to this month. But moving forward, what we will have is that spreadsheet updated of all the projects, where they are. I think Mr. Glover asked if we would put the addresses for all the projects. You can see where they are, what the status. So when you get that, that's what that spreadsheet is. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to send those to the administrator. We'll get whatever information that you want. And that concludes our report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Cunningham,
Yes, ma'am.
could I just take a minute to thank Mr. Atkinson for following through on that?
Yes, ma'am. Happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jared?
Yes, I have just a quick update to give the committee. So just something, Ms. Howard, this is probably pertinent to you and your district. So at the Sands Boat Landing, wanted to give a quick update. We've got a couple of comments, citizen comments of some maintenance issues. We've been working on that for a period of time. But wanted to give a background and history just on some of the outstanding or maintenance requests that we've had over the time of the last 4 or 5 years. So in March 2020, we've rented, at least that we're aware of, a long reach excavator so we could get there and do some maintenance at that area of cost at least $5,000. In May of 22, we had some damage to the existing floating docks. So what happens is the sand gets underneath the floating dock and it breaks and shears the transition plates and renders it pretty much useless. So we replaced that and did some significant cleaning out for about $150,000 in May of 22. This past January, there was more damage to the docks from the storm and again, significant sand and debris. So we replaced the docks for about $80,000. And even since January, we've had at least 2 times where Public Works has gone out there with their equipment to remove sand and silt buildup. So it's something we continue to fight, but in summary, over the last 5 years, we spent about $250,000 just maintaining and maintaining the sand and silt to keep that usable. So not really anything beyond that. Just want to, I know that's been a highlight here recently. We've had a couple citizens comments, and since they were pertinent, thought we would just come and report on that.
At the
What dock
Sands,
was
right?
that?
This is the Sands boat landing.
Sands?
Yeah, there in Port Royal. So that's all I had. Just wanted to share that information, just so you guys are aware of the actions that we're taking at
Is
Public
this the
Works.
same one that got the damage during the storm?
It is, that's right. We were out of the last one, we were able to get some insurance funding, so the $80,000 repair that we had, I believe it's about $50,000 we were able to recoup through insurance funding. We were unsuccessful in getting any FEMA funding,
Oh, okay.
but
Perfect. Any other questions for Jared or the team?
thank you.
All right, we will move on then to number 8. Resolution to adopt the airport's wildlife management policy. John, how are you today, sir?
Good afternoon. Doing great. I hope you are too.
We'll have a motion and put it on the floor for discussion.
I'll make that motion.
In a second.
I'll second.
Mr. Dawson seconded. After you, sir.
Great, thank you. All right, so first of all I want to do is just address a few things that came up last time that we brought this policy forward, and that was back in November of 2024. So it's been a while since we've been in front of you with that. At the last time, if you remember, there were 3 public speakers who came up in the public comment period before the agenda came up, and 2. Well, let me stop. I think there was a little bit of maybe misinterpretation by members of the committee that those were airport employees. And I want to let you know that they were not county employees. Those 2 of the 3 were actually federal employees. They were TSA employees. And the third was not someone who worked at the airport at all. So I just want to make sure you knew that. After that meeting, I did speak with the federal security director in Charleston just about what their policy was for addressing, public officials and that sort of thing. So he's got that under control. But I know that at that time there was concern about, kind of the environment at the airport, the atmosphere. And so that was addressed within the TSA chain of command. So just to check that
Good
off
to know.
your,
Yeah,
check
for
that off
sure.
your worry list. And I think it's important to talk a little bit about, just based on, what's been going on in social media and everything, about the policy, or maybe not about the policy, but about what the policy is not. So I wanted to address kind of what the policy is and what it is not. And what it is, very simply, is it's a policy, a safety policy at the airport that is in line with other policies at airports around the nation, and they're designed to protect human life as well as personal property, through trying to prevent, minimize wildlife strikes with aircraft. What it is not is a specific policy that hones in on any specific item at the airport. It's an airport-wide, frankly, an airports-wide. It covers both of our airports. We've kind of widened that scope because we do have wildlife concerns, from time to time at both airports. So we did increase the scope of that to include both Hilton Head Island Airport and Beaufort Executive Airport. Because I think there were some questions last time too about why one and not the other. And the answer to that was that there's different federal regulations at the airports, because Hilton Head Island Airport is a commercial airport, whereas Beaufort Executive is not. But since we do have some concerns that, at both airports, there are wildlife all around Beaufort County, we decided to include both airports in the policy. And during the last 3 months, I know everybody has paid attention to the news, but you've seen multiple aviation incidents throughout the nation and throughout the world. Our aim is
Not
to...
in the South.
Sorry?
Not in the South, but go ahead.
Not in the South. It depends on how far north you're from. But we don't want any of that, at our airport. So this is just another important safety step, and frankly, safety level matters at every level that we're dealing with. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to do to incorporate safety into the airports. Also, since some of the tenants spoke at the last meeting, I want to let you know that, as always, airport leadership is in constant communication with the different tenants at the airport. We do hold monthly meetings specifically for the tenants who are in the terminal, so that they have a chance to interact with airport leadership ask questions, but also receive updates as to what's going on with construction projects, particularly with the terminal project, and then just any other things that are happening at the airport, especially this time of year as we enter into the busy season at Hilton Head. We've got spring break and other issues going on. So we do have opportunities to make sure that we're in constant communication with those tenants. And interestingly, within the last couple of months, both our deputy director, Steve Perry, and myself, independently, different times, different days, have been out at the terminal in the parking lot, and we've run into some of the caretakers of the cats out there at the airport. And they've been, I can only describe as excellent and positive communications. It's very interesting because some of them were definitely tuned into the social media that was going on, and when they met us and had a chance to talk with us and interact, and we could share with them our priorities and listen to what their priorities were, we realized that we really had a lot of interests in common. You know, we're looking out for the same things. But I think if you have children and you try to keep them off of social media, there's a reason we do that, and that might work for adults as well. So it had definitely influenced some of the opinions that were out there. So we had some great, very, I would say, respectful, cordial, and mutually understanding conversations out there with some of the teams who are caregivers to those cats. So they understand where we're coming from, and we understand where they're coming from. So there's been a lot of work that's been going on behind the scenes. And then within the county, we've worked a lot with John Robinson and with Hannah and PIO to just try to help address some of those comments on social media and to keep things a little bit cooler, and working with John and his team through Animal Services just to come up with options and try to come up with the best solution for what to do to, you know, keep folks happy and make sure we can get this policy passed as well for the overall safety of the airport. Your package this time also includes a few more pieces of information that were not included last time, and some of those came up in part in discussion from the speakers last time. So those were all included either in the written form or via hyperlink in that additional information package. So hopefully everybody had a chance to kind of thumb through that, but to understand what the background is behind the safety policy and why that came about and why it's important at the airport. So with that, I'm happy to try to answer any of your questions.
We have any questions for John?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. O'Toole, I really appreciated the extensive report here about the mammals, and I was really fascinated by the raptors. I don't think of a hawk as a raptor, so this was kind of interesting to me, but I think it was very impressive that we could look at what these different, like the red-shouldered hawk, what difference they make when they intersect with an airplane. So I think this was great information. I don't know that people really think about how these could impact air travel. So I really appreciate you put this in here.
Yep, just so you know, Tab, it's Mr. Rembold. not
Oh,
Mr.
sorry,
O'Toole.
yes, sorry.
Never mind, the airport's economic development, it's okay.
Sorry, I'm not with it today. I'm so sorry.
You're good, you're good.
Mr. Rumble, it's good information, I really appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Glover?
Yeah, thank you. Tab, they look alike, don't they?
No,
Same hairstyle.
they're not.
I'm more concerned about the wildlife, birds. And you had a picture up a few minutes ago. There are not many retention ponds near the airport, are there?
There are some retention ponds near the airport, yes. And that's obviously something that's a hard item to address in the low country because of the stormwater requirements that we have. So we try to minimize those, and we also try to minimize those in developments that are near the airport. So we try to, inform municipalities who are reviewing and approving projects to try to minimize that. You can have surface ponds, but there are different treatments that you can use at surface ponds. Netting over the top of those ponds works in some cases, or actually, believe it or not, floating balls to cover the surface, and that will dissuade wading birds from taking up their wading or their roosting in those areas.
So you providing some kind of management guides for those with retention ponds to help minimize the activity there?
The latest example that I can give you is the Walmart out by Beaufort Executive, and we did provide input to that design. It wasn't implemented at the end of the day, and there's really not much that we can do, to enforce that other than to make calls if we do see a lot of waiting birds and things like that. But the fact of the matter is both of our airports are in close proximity to natural, water bodies, whether it's the ocean, the Port Royal Sound, or the St. Helena Sound, and the tidal creeks in the areas. So there's only so much we can do, right adjacent to the airports to minimize that, but we do make every attempt.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions before we call it? Can this be approved with no objection to be sent to county council?
Yes.
And I see no objection. This will be sent to county council, I believe, next week or maybe 2 weeks after that? 2 weeks, perfect. All right, moving on to number 9, a resolution authorizing the county administrator entering a non-tenant commercial operating agreement between Beaufort County and Palmetto Aces Flying Club. Can I have a motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
A second?
I'll second it.
Tab with the second. Thank you. Yes, sir?
All right, this is a simple one. It's a gentleman who owns an airplane and will be renting it out to a club who will participate in flying it. So since he will generate revenue from that, then by our rules and regs, the airport stands to benefit to a small piece of that. It'll be a small business, but it keeps us within rules and regulations.
Any questions?
I have a question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
About how much revenue do you anticipate? I was surprised to see it's only 3% of their gross revenues, not to be greedy, but 3% is kind of minimal.
Right, that's our standard agreement right now. That's a good question, but once we have that agreement established, we keep that as the standard. So we may review that at some point and increase it. I don't anticipate, a small entity like this who's renting an airplane to generate a whole lot of revenue. So this is, I won't say it's a formality, but it's a small step up from a formality.
And does this preclude other people from using these spaces, or it's just as needed?
No, ma'am, this is not, this isn't a space agreement or anything like this. It's actually the use of an airplane, and that use generates revenue because it's a rental of an aircraft. So everything that we do is non-exclusive as well.
Okay, thanks.
Can this be done with no objection? And I see no objection. Thank you. This will
Thank
be
you.
approved.
Thank you.
Before we go on to number 10, I know we started this meeting early. A couple people came in, and we already did citizens comment, but are there any of you that wanted to speak? 'Cause I know we started. Yes, ma'am. I think we have to take a motion to add it to the agenda.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Second, any objection to add that as 10A? This will be approved with no objection. So if you want to come on up and just state your name, and thank you for coming out today.
Well, I thought it was at 4, so I appreciate you allowing me to speak.
Of course, of course.
Hello, everyone at council and those on the screen. I'm Mayor Deckard, and I'd like to speak on the splash pad agreement that's before you. This is my perspective on it. It's actually something that's bothered me for some time. The problem with the Bruce Edgerly Park project is not solely about whether the town and the county would be properly proceeding with the splash pad. It goes back to when the county initially ratified that improper playground equipment purchase. And to be clear about that, the money was never budgeted for Bruce Edgerly Field alone. There was $550,000 that the county budgeted that was supposed to be spent in 2025, and it was for all of the parks in Port Royal, not just one that had not existed really in that state until that time. And aside from the fact the county still has no idea how much that equipment really cost, how much the vendor actually profited, whether there were kickbacks, rebates, et cetera, to employees. As far as I'm aware, there was never an intergovernmental agreement between the county and Port Royal to mutually operate this park. And as an example, if someone got hurt today on that playground, who's liable? The county or Port Royal? If there's an access issue, who's responsible for correcting it? The county or Port Royal? And when were traffic studies done to ensure there would be adequate parking in a residential neighborhood? And who's responsible for that? And if there are contractors involved, to whom are they responsible and which entity is liable if they are injured? In government especially, there always has to be a beginning in order to carry out the required fiduciary responsibilities and the duty to protect the public. Further, as we already know, elements of this park are under a state investigation. Now I want to move on to the splash pad. When ARPA monies are involved, or obligated, which is the actual word they use, there are certain procedures that must be followed when two governmental entities are involved. According to Port Royal's announcement in December in the newspaper, they said they were purchasing the splash pad, the county was going to maintain it, and Port Royal had already chosen the vendors. And this is the language that you have in the agreement. Whereas the town desires to purchase, permit, and install a splash pad on the park property and donate all of the improvements detailed in Exhibits 2 and 3, attached hereto and incorporated by reference. I'm almost finished. As I understand it, if an ARPA obligation involves two governments, an intergovernmental agreement must be in place prior to the deadline of 12/31/24. Otherwise, how does the county have a choice in the matter? After all, as of today, the county has no idea of future costs involving maintenance and liability. There have been no traffic studies done. In anticipation of the traffic expected for the proposed equipment, Port Royal has been touting as the only splash pad in northern Beaufort County. So, are you a subrecipient? Are you a partner? If you're a subrecipient, you select the vendors. Port Royal doesn't select the vendors. I mean, what's your status here in this arrangement? So just want to say at the end of the day, I think a lot more information is needed by the county before they approve anything. The legalities as it pertains to a lack of an overall intergovernmental agreement for this park, a copy of the documentation Port Royal submitted to the federal government for the splash pad prior to 12/31/2024, any documentation as to vendors the town has purportedly already selected, and was there an intergovernmental agreement required to be submitted to the federal government by the town of Port Royal to the Treasury prior to the deadline of 12/31/2024? I mean, there's already a state investigation. Do we really want to invite the feds in now? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that did not sign up that would like to speak? All right, we will close the citizens' comment and move on back to our original number 10 in our capital projects. An intergovernmental agreement with the town of Port Royal to allow the funding, construction, and donation of a splash pad on the county-owned park site at the Bruce Edgar Lee Field and Port Royal Center adjacent to the new accessible playground. Do I have a motion to put this on the floor?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second it.
It's seconded by Ms. Brown, motion by Ms. Howard. How are you?
Pretty well. Hello again. The intergovernmental agreement that's before you is to approve the town of Port Royal making a purchase of property, but we are allowing them to put that onto our property. And so all costs for installation, purchase, installation, and construction are done through the town by their procurement policy. But because it's on our property, we then, as the recipient, not a subrecipient under ARPA because there's no funds exchanged to us, we simply have to agree, and that's why we want to put it in writing what this long-term commitment from us would be to maintain the property that's being donated to us. And so we actually met again this morning on site. We went back and forth with what is, that property is solely our property. Operation on that property, liability on that property is the county's responsibility. So upon the donation of this new splash pad system, that will become our property as stated in the agreement, and it was donated to us at completion and certificate of occupancy. We went through costs. It is not in addition to our property. We insure our properties through the IRF. Because we have so many properties, there's not an impact on our overall insurance burden. However, there is maintenance and operation of that facility. And so Initially, the maintenance was assumed to be higher than it actually is because it was a recirculating system upon which we based it, similar to the one in Bluffton. This is a non-recirculating facility, which means there are no pumps and filters. It is a water pressure-based simple system. So the maintenance went way down as far as what we have to do to maintain the property. However, the water usage has gone up. So our estimate of between $25,000 and $30,000 a year to the county remains solid, and that gives us money for basic repairs to the equipment, as it's a much more simplified system than the one in Bluffton.
All right, do we have any questions or comments?
I have quite a few questions.
Yes, ma'am.
Only, my questions come because of my experience at the U.S. Treasury Department.
Mm-hmm.
And these ARPA funds came from the U.S. Treasury. So my first question is, why didn't we receive this agreement before December 31st?
That's not our ARPA funds being used. It's the town of Port Royal's ARPA funds.
Right.
So it was their responsibility, and they procured this through their system.
Okay, so they procured. So do we know what the agreement was with the U.S. Treasury and the town of Port Royal?
They have to follow their procurement policy, and I'm not sure, we could go, I can go down the rabbit hole of how money's allocated and utilized.
Oh,
So,
no, I don't want to do, I don't, no, that's not my question.
But there was a purchase and procurement by the town of Port Royal, and that's the way, that is
what-
the report to Treasury from them.
Okay, so I'm not being clear here, I'm sorry. What I'm asking is, why didn't this intergovernment agreement come to us before, and why now? Why didn't it come to us last year? And when did they get it approved by the Treasury Department?
You have to submit your reports by the end of, actually, it was the first quarter of this year that you had to report on what you did before December 31 of 2026, which is my understanding that the town of Port Royal has done so. And the intergovernmental agreement has to do with the liability acceptance later, and they had to get their money obligated by rule by December 31 of 2024. And so that's why they had to procure this before that deadline, and then we wanted to get, the idea was much more simplified. We will buy this and put it on the park. And then the county said, we need to draw up an agreement to make sure who has what liability, what responsibility long-term. And that's why this IGA has come up now, to make sure that before the actual completion of the project, or even the starting of the project and the signing of the contract, that we have these in place approved by you guys.
Who pays for the water, Hank?
We do.
We do?
It would be our
And we're
responsibility.
gonna pay for the insurance, but you said that insurance, you just answered my question.
It's insured as part of our package
Yeah, that's fine.
with the IRF.
How, are we allowed to receive a donation from another government entity?
Yes,
We are?
yes.
And with the bathrooms under investigation, do you think we should do more research on this? No?
I don't necessarily see how they're related, but that's not.
We have a problem with the bathrooms on that property. I'm just a little worried. Since the Treasury, I used to work at Treasury. I was with the Secretary of Treasury, and there's a ton of undersecretaries in the Treasury Department. And I'm sure we have dealt with one of the undersecretaries regarding these ARP funds. And it just worries me that we're getting into with another government entity, but yet the federal government gave us these funds. I'm probably not making my point very clear, I know, but there was an article in the Island Packet last year, I'm sure you read that. So I'm just a little concerned about this. I don't know, just a little nervous about it. And like the town of Bluffton, they put a splash pad in, they put it on their own property. Why is the town of Port Royal doing the same?
Because we own the park properties in Port Royal.
All the park properties?
Anything with the size to accommodate this, to my understanding.
Really? Oh. Okay.
That's true.
What? I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, we have another agreement flipped, if you want to, just for everyone's information. Fort Frederick County owns it, but the town of Port Royal maintains it. It's down by the Naval Hospital. It's a passive park. The county built a pavilion, parking, and then turned it the maintenance is done by the town of Port Royal.
So we have gotten agreements like this
We've done
before, and
agreements.
there's never been a problem?
That has not been a problem.
Okay. But the ARP funds worry me. That's
The ARPA funds, that would be a liability. If there was ever to be an issue, it would be a liability of the town.
The
And that they
town
had,
of Port Royal, not us?
No, because the recipient of the funds, which is the town of Port Royal, not Beaufort County, is responsible for the justification of the use of those funds. And this is a simple, this is to us, is an acceptance of this property upon completion. And we wanted to let you all know what that long-term carrying cost would be, which would be part of our annual budget.
Do you have any more, Ms. Brown?
No?
Just quickly, the source of water and where is the end game for the water? You talking about all this water is coming, you gotta go someplace.
Yes, it is a Beaufort Jasper water sewer. There's a 2-inch line that runs to the facility.
So it's public water, I mean.
Public, yeah, yes. And then there is a discharge of those waters back into the sewer system. And that's what the cost estimate at around $25,000 is, based upon usage of like facilities around as installed by this company.
Normally, the sewer company charge their sewer rate based on the amount of water.
I can tell you, I can give you the calculations if you'd like. This is not a constantly running apparatus. There are buttons that people will push or pedals people will step upon, and there are timers. It's basically like your sprinkler system in your yard, where there's a battery-powered solenoid that upon engagement will open, and the pressure within the system supplies, which is between 30 and 40 pounds PSI, how about that? That pounds per square inch, that will power these 6 1-inch heads that remain on for about 30 seconds each. So if you take that and working with the company that installs them in usage, we factored on 3 to 3.5 hours of full blast operation throughout a day, 200 days per year, which generates that usage. And that includes the water and sewer. Water coming in is about $4 a gallon, well, $4 per 1,000 gallons.
Oh,
And sewer going into the system is $10.13 per 1,000. And so we've dug way down into the numbers on this usage to get you a good estimate on the use, on what the water consumption will be.
And then the final question I have, is would this be free to the public or would it be a charge?
It's free to the public.
It'd be free to the public. And so the annual budget would be roughly, what, you have any idea of to run this?
25 to 30.
$25,000 to $30,000, that $30,000 being on a very high water estimate of usage. And that still builds in a couple $1,000s for a replacement of a head here or there or a solenoid within the system per year. There's one other thing that Eric Brown, who's gone through this as well, is also included the flushing of the drain line annually, just to make sure that sand doesn't get in there. So we've thought about all those different components of how we need to operate this.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I think I know the answer. The senior center is there,
Yes,
oh,
and it is staffed by county Parks and Rec personnel.
yes.
And I think that was part of by having personnel close by to those.
Right. So that facility has personnel on site 5 days a week for business hours.
Are there any other questions?
If I might?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. For the record, I would state that I am an avid supporter for public recreation. It's much needed throughout Beaufort County. Our youth today, they don't have much of any valid recreation to occupy their times. And so, in my personal opinion, I think that attributes to some of the violence and some of the activities that are unwanted in our communities. I commend the town of Port Royal for taking this initiative to actually provide that type of recreation for the children, not only of Port Royal, for Beaufort County at large. It's open to the public, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We're in the process of trying to establish a splash pad for the Burton Wells Recreation Center as well. It's on our capital improvement list. God knows when we're gonna get it up and going and out on the grounds, but nevertheless, it's in the pipeline. My only concern about this is that while Port Royal actually initiated this and is bringing it to fruition by ARPA funds, it's not costing them anything. And we have taken on the responsibility of maintenance and operation. And I think Port Royal should share in some of that cost of maintenance and operation. That's the only drawback and concern I have. Other than that, I'm in full support of it.
How much, do we know the value of the splash pad itself?
What was the cost?
290,000? Okay. I do have the same mentality as Mr. Dawson. I'm totally on board partnering with municipalities to get projects done. They took the initiative to get it done. Does this still have to go to county afterwards?
Yes.
Okay. I guess my only question would be, how much are we currently spending on that facility a year? And what is the usage of that facility per year? Because this is something that I've discussed multiple times with, Mr. Glover and I have had these combos before about other rec centers, about, putting money into them. And we also have to make sure that we're putting money into places that are being used. That's also a big thing. So if we are gonna be spending this money on maintenance, which I really don't have a problem taking that on if it is something that's better in the community and it's being used to full operation. Sounds like something that we're gonna have to dive in deep with full council as well. I wouldn't put this past. That's not a slam dunk on council, because some of these discussions I think could happen. But I do think it's great partnering with Port Royal to get this done and get this off the ground. Just to make sure that all of our Ts are crossed and Is are dotted properly. If all the funding is being done on their side, getting this operation up, that means the liability of any of that funding being done appropriately is also on them. So that doesn't worry me one bit. You've already answered all the other questions about insurance along those lines. So with that said, if there is no, yes.
So would you like us to bring back what usage? Because I can tell you from being in parks, I don't know the number, but we can work on that. It's not a little clicker at the door, but I can tell you that that's one of the most highly utilized parks in the county.
That's good enough for me.
Right.
That's definitely helpful. I just want to make sure it is one that is being
Yes,
used. That's all,
absolutely.
for sure. If there's no other questions, we'll call this to.
Yeah, just quickly, the splash pad in Bluffton, how active is that? How are the?
I don't know, they opened up right before winter last year. They operated for about a month and shut down for winter, and I'm not sure what the numbers are. I've heard rave reviews, but I've not been, that's not been our information together.
Okay.
But it's also not our splash pad.
Right.
Right.
We don't fund it. We don't maintain it.
No, I'm just
Yeah,
wondering
right.
about the activity, that's all.
Oh, yeah,
The
yeah.
use of it, and et cetera. Yeah.
It just like their new park as well. The one that they just opened was done by them as well.
Right.
By the Red Barn.
Could, Mr. Willis is here, do he want to say anything?
No, just a reminder, the residents of Port Royal are also county taxpayers, so we will share some of the burden of the
Oh.
Okay, I'm fine.
Any other questions? Can this be done with no objection?
I object.
One objection. Any others? This will be done with one objection, Sarah. Alrighty, this will move on to County Council. We will go on to number 11. An ordinance authorizing the abandonment of a drainage easement recorded in deed book 3044 at page 2170.
I'll make that motion.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Right, any discussion on this? If everyone's already read their backup documents on it.
Right.
Can this be done with no objection?
Yes.
And I see no objection on that. And we will move on to number 12, an ordinance authorizing the abandonment of an easement encumbering property identified as TMS number R300-035-00A 0004 0000. Any discussion on this one? My only question is this the only bid we had? That would be my only question, just to make sure that we have that.
Three firms were chosen.
Yeah, that's correct. So This was RFQ, so this is based off qualifications for professional services with engineers. We had 9 proposals submitted. Out of that, we interviewed the top 3 ranked, and out of the top 3 ranked, we worked with Seaman Whiteside. So, and then Seaman Whiteside, we went back and forth on a scope and fee, and that's what's included in the handout.
And you guys do that by a scale, right? Like a numbering scale?
Yeah, so
for
whenever
different
we put
divisions?
out a solicitation, to each solicitation, we put a criteria, a grading criteria that is known to all bidders prior to putting out, and then that's how we select the top-ranked firms.
Any other questions for Jared? Can this be approved with no objection? All right, and because the dollar amount, this will be going on to county council as well, and this will be approved with no objection. We're moving on to number 14, approval to abandon maintenance activities to a section of Seagrass Drive and return a portion of the road to be classified as private. Do we have a motion to put this on the floor? Not all at once.
I like that motion.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Tab with the second. Do we have any discussion about this? This is actually turning it back to private property, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. This is just the last portion of this road. So there's 3 property owners that had collectively said, hey, we would like to not have maintenance, so if they so choose, they can do whatever, but it would be up to them to maintain, to get to their driveway, to their house.
Perfect. Any objection?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Jared, isn't that a little unusual?
It is, I mean, more often than not, we see people asking for maintenance, but what this provides is if they want to put a fence or a gate up, that when it's private, they have that ability to do so.
Got it, thanks.
So where it becomes private, is there enough space there for a fire truck to turn around at the end of the Beaufort County road?
I want to clarify, this is actually one property owner who owns all 3 parcels around the property. And they have like a little gate that you can still turn around before it, where it's Sweetgrass Road. And you can turn around before it, but basically it's just becoming a private driveway for the property owners. One owner who owns 3 parcels that surround the section.
But so this doesn't have a cul-de-sac, so it is a little back and forth, but as Patty mentioned, they could make that turning movement.
Can this be done with no objection? This will also be approved with no objection. We have moving on to 15 and 16, 2 reappointments. I would like to take those together, so if I could have a motion, I'll read both.
I like that motion.
Motion.
I'll second that.
And second to take them together. I'll read them and then we'll vote.
Okay.
The reappointment of Lawrence Bryan to Solid Waste and Recycling Board with the expiration date of February 2029. And the reappointments of Clarence Daniels and James Backer to the Beaufort County Transportation Committee for a 4-year term that also expires in February 2029. Do we have any discussion for these 3 reappointments? Can they both be approved with no objection?
No objection.
We did.
We did.
We made the motion to take them together, and then, any objection?
No.
This will also be approved with no objection, and those will go on to the consent agenda of county council. All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
could we go back up to 14? I know we've moved on with it, but I just need a little clarification for me.
Sure.
Can Ms. Wilson speak on this? I know closing a public road to a private road, when we close, we turn county road to private road, it may be done by one individual, but it impacts others.
Well, this
Would
is,
anybody be affected with this change other than the people that are making the
go ahead and put
request?
that back up. So these people petitioned to make the road private. They petitioned to make this portion of the road, and if you see the yellow part,
Right.
they own all those parts. They're the only ones that would be affected by making the road private, because nobody else would need to get back there and use the road except
So the
them.
green becomes,
The green
is
So that
still,
green section where the yellow section is, you see where the green and yellow?
right?
Yeah, that would be just yellow, that would be considered private. And the other portion that's green would still stay green. So the public would still be using, could still use that road, but just, they're not gonna be going in these people's driveway.
So the green is the county road.
Right,
Okay, then the yellow is the private.
private, and that's the
Okay.
part that's gonna be private.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. That answered my question.
All right, with that said, this meeting will be concluded at 3:47. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.
Thank you.